Once again, I'd like to share with you the essence of what I taught this past Shabbat, Parashat Pinchas, based on the fact that at the end of the last parasha we're told about this somewhat violent act of Pinchas, that he kills Zimri and Cosby in the action as they're committing adultery in front of the entire nation, a public display of undermining the values of the Torah and the values of Jewish life, at least as we understand the parasha on the surface. And as a response to that, in the opening of this parasha, Hashem tells Moshe to tell Pinchas, Hineni noten lo briti shalom, I'm giving him my peace prize. And this is not just a Nobel Peace Prize, this is the peace prize of Hashem himself. A Brit Shalom, a covenant of peace for him, not only for his lifetime, but for all eternity, for the lifetime, for the lives of his entire family. And it's a little bit shocking when we think of it, that for such a violent, albeit important and praiseworthy action, he's given, of all things, the peace prize. To understand this, we need to understand an idea that Reb Chaim Shmulevitz taught, my Rosh Yeshiva at Mir, in a hesped that he gave for his father-in-law and Rebbe Reb Leizer Yehuda Finkel, who was the son of the Alter of Slabodka, of Reb Nota Hirsch Finkel. And he asks, based on the Midrash, that the reason the Torah gives us his paternal yichus, Pinchas is, we're told that Pinchas is the son of Elazar, the son of Aharon Kohen. Why is that so? And the Midrash Tanchuma says because the other tribes, the heads of the other tribes, were mocking Pinchas, and they were mocking his heritage. That he doesn't really come from much, certainly on his mother's side. Now he's going around killing princes of Israel. Isn't that incredible chutzpah? Isn't that incredible arrogance? Where does that come from? And so Hashem says, don't forget who his paternal yichus is, who he is descended from, paternally descended from Aaron Kohen. And this is an incredibly great man from an incredibly great background. Says Reb Chaim Shmulevitz, that's all very well to explain why this parasha opens up with his yichus, with his family background, with his family tree. But we're given the same yichus at the end of last week's parasha, at the end of Parashas Balak, when he actually commits the crime. Before he commits the crime, we're told that Pinchas came, the son of Elazar and the son of Aaron, and he saw what was going on, and he acted. Why are we given the fact of his paternal heritage at that stage, before he's committed the act, and certainly before anybody started mocking him? Explains Reb Chaim Shmulevitz, because what the Torah wants to teach us is that if he were not a descendant of his grandfather Aharon, not only biologically, but in terms of his spiritual DNA, in terms of his character, Aaron was an Ohev Shalom, Veroidev Shalom. Aaron was the epitome of a man who loved peace and pursued peace. And Pinchas was the same. That's what the Torah is telling us. This was a man that loved peace and pursued peace. And it's only because of that he was entitled to commit this act, and be sure that he was doing so for the right reason, that he was doing so because it was imperative in order to stop the plague. It was imperative in order to stop the weakening of Jewish family life and the weakening of the traditions of the Torah and the moral values of the Torah, that he had to do this. Because if he wasn't an Ohev Shalom, Veroidev Shalom, if he wasn't a lover and pursuer of peace, then there's a good chance that there would have been some personal pleasure or sense of justification in killing Zimri. The fact that he was a person who embodied the very essence of Aaron meant that he did it for pure reasoning. It's a wonderful explanation, but then give the peace prize to Aaron. If Aaron is the founder of the principle of Ahavat Shalom, of loving peace among all else, of pursuing peace at the cost of all else, if Aaron is that man who imbued it into his family, surely Aaron should get the Brit Shalom? Surely Aaron should get the peace prize rather than Pinchas, who is his grandson and contains those same qualities, but isn't Aaron himself? For that, we need to ask a different question, and we've got to see the fact that Reb Simcha Zissel, who is the Alter of Kelm, comments that what he was given the prize for was not really just the fact that he killed Zimri and Cosby, because Hashem had given an instruction already for the Jewish people to kill all those who were guilty of the terrible crime that was causing the plague, and Pinchas would have been doing just what everybody else was instructed to do. That wasn't the essence of it. The essence was the gevurah that he showed. Gevurah is that single-minded purposefulness, that nothing causes an individual to pull back, to be inhibited, to fear doing that which is right. And that's why, as Rashi tells us, that we're given the yichus of both Zimri and Cosbi. Zimri is a prince of the Jewish people. Cosbi is the daughter of the head of the United Nations of the time. She is a Rosh Umot. Her father was the head of the nations, and she is a princess. That didn't bother Pinchas. He knew that he had to do this, and it should not and did not make any difference to him who the individual was, how powerful they were, what families they came from. That gvura is what he was really rewarded for, which again is a little difficult because we're told he was given the peace prizes, and Reb Chaim Shmulevitz said it's because he was a descendant of Aaron. Why would he be given the peace prize for showing gvura? And that leads us to the essential understanding of this piece of Chumash, what's really going on. It wasn't that he was rewarded for being a man of peace. And it wasn't that he was being rewarded for being a man of strength and single-minded determination. He was rewarded for being the synthesis of both. The fact that he was, in his essence, in his heart and in his soul, was a man of peace, and yet when the time was called for, was able to be a person of power and to be able to exert his authority correctly and truly. That's what's great. For somebody who's aggressive and arrogant to take the law into his hands and do what has to be done, that's understandable. For an individual to be peace-loving and peaceful, that's understandable. But for a person who is innately peace-loving to be able to do what he did and ignore the status of the people involved and execute the law the way it needed to be executed in that moment without any thought of self-protection, that was something worthy of Brit Shalom. And it reminds me of the very important piece in the Sefer HaIkrim, that's by Rabbi Yosef Albo, the book of philosophy, a medieval Jewish philosopher, so terribly important, who talks about the fact that ki hahaskama bein hahafechim yikharei shalom. When you have harmony between two opposites, that is called peace. Peace is not the absence of conflict. Peace is when you take two conflicting powers, two conflicting energies, and you're able to harmonize them, not by compromise, but by holding those opposites together. It's something that we do with our emotions. If somebody were to say, are you happy or sad? One is perfectly legitimately able to answer, I'm happy and sad. The Telzerov speaks about the time that Yosef was sent down to Egypt, and what a chesed it was that Hashem miraculously arranged that the camels that usually carry hides and oil were carrying fragrances and perfumes just to make the journey more pleasant for Yosef. And the Telzerov asked, surely there were other things on Yosef's mind at that point. He'd just been pulled out of the pit, saved in the nick of time, had his life saved in the nick of time, being put onto these animals, being sent away from his father forever and from his family. Surely he had other things to think about than the aesthetics of his environment. And yet the Telzerov explains we can hold more than one thing in our sensibility at any given time. We can be desperately sad and worried on the one hand and be able to celebrate the beauty of life and the value of life at the same time. That's what the human being is capable of. And the Ikrim says when you have two opposite forces, that completion, that wholeness, that shalom is כשיהיה בכל אחד מהקצוות כוח להתגבר על חברו, כמו שחברו מתגבר עליו. Where these two forces are equally powerful, each has the power to overcome the other. Peace is not when one side is dominant and the other side is meek. Peace is not when one side has devastated the other. Peace is when two powerful nations or two powerful people or two powerful feelings within the person are able to operate harmoniously and can be held as one, both having value, both having power, and able to operate and work together. That brings about sustainability and peace, explains the Ikrim. That's why the Gemara says in Kiddushin, tell Pinchas that I'm giving him the covenant of peace, this amazing peace prize. Says the Gemara, kshu shalem v'lo kshu chaser, provided he is shalem, provided he is a whole person who's able to hold these opposites and work with these opposites within himself and still have complete integration and integrity. Ask the Gemara, but it says shalom, it doesn't say shalem. It says the Gemara, but if you look at the vav of shalom, you'll see it's a vav k'tia, it's a broken vav, which means there's a little fracture in the upright piece of the vav, and therefore the word can be read shalem, or shalom, because those two words are so closely connected. Shalom, as the Ikrim explains, means shleimut. And shleimut, wholeness, means being able to incorporate opposites and hold them together, being able to acknowledge opposites, be able to make space for opposites, being able to respect opposites. That's what shalom is. What an important message for our times, that even if we talk about Israeli society, but the same applies throughout, we're in such a polarized world. And it's a polarized world because we're not displaying the ability to be able to hold opposites and create a space for opposites. Somebody whose opinion is opposite from mine, but I respect the person nevertheless, and I can work with the person in areas of common interest. And so it is in Israel today. We need Haredim, people whose lives are dedicated to the study and practice of Torah, and they do nothing else. And we need people whose lives are dedicated to building the country and to building business. And we need people who are able to bridge that and are able to learn amazing Torah and keep mitzvot with enormous seriousness, and at the same time participate in not only in the army but in the worlds of business and the professions, and they're able to do both, so as to be able to build up a powerful and a strong state, a state in which there is shalom, a state in which there's true peace. And that peace is from the word shalem, where it's wholeness and integration, and it's not a fractured society. And when we, in our own societies, are able to achieve that shlemut and that shalom, when we as individuals are each able to achieve that level of tranquility and peacefulness within ourselves, while all our different drives and emotions and feelings are alive and vital, we can still integrate them into a whole and hold the opposites within us. When we can respect one another, even though we don't agree with one another, then not only will there be shalom internally, but that shalom will overflow into our relationship with our neighbors and with the world as a whole.